Hello, so my name is Hector Luna and my teammate is Isabel Cisneros. We did this presentation about ELT materials and in which we include the topics such as adopt, adapt, or design. We are going to talk about a little bit about these topics and also explain how we understand them and the things that we learn through this project. First of all, well, in this presentation, as I said before, we're going to explain the principal insights when creating, adapting, or adopting English language learning materials. And we also provide, from the presenter's point of view, from my point of view, what was learned during the process of the current task. The first topic that we explain is the ELT materials, English language teaching materials in the curriculum, in which we mention about the materials are the tools that facilitate the learning of a language and help learners learn what they want and they need to learn. Hence, teachers should make sure that the materials is effective, appropriate, and flexible for their students and their programs. So it's not only about adopting, creating, or adapting materials without knowing anything else, but trying to focus on the curriculum. And throughout this presentation, we will see that the curriculum plays an important role in the selection of the ELT materials that are going to be carried out in the classroom. First of all, as an option or options, well, I like to mention that like you have three options: create your materials, adapt your materials, or adopt your materials, depending on your situation, your context, and depending the curriculum of where you're working. And first, in the adoption versus adoption, we have the adoption is contextualized, while adoption does not fit learners' reality. Adoption maximizes material's effectiveness by making some changes to the material, contrary to adoption, where few or no adaptations are made. Adaptation tends to be time-consuming, while adoption facilitates the workload of teachers. In general, adaptation is when you take one material from other context and you adapt it, but for adapting, you have to take the time to consider if it is a good resource and if you are able to make changes in order to be adapted to your context, to your type of learners. And adoption is only taking the materials without changing anything and implementing with your learners and in your English practice. The important aspects of adaptation is that it's essential because the learning situations are changeable. Therefore, the English teacher is required to adapt the textbooks in order to make them fit to the learner environment and to maximize students' learning. However, adapt is not always possible due to the constraints on them from the institution or institutions where they work. And teachers must be experienced enough to understand which elements are being left out or inadequately covered while adapting their materials. Teachers must make sure the adaptation maximizes the effectiveness of the material. When designing your own materials, I will explain some advantages and some disadvantages. Of course, we will have more advantages than disadvantages. And to begin with the advantages, there are more advantages than the disadvantage, and we will have up-to-date materials that from our perspectives, we're going to create these materials with the era or with the time that we are living. If something is popular nowadays, the singers, the actors, the movies, we can implement it or we can include them in our materials. So with this advantage, students will be more involved in what they in their interests because it's popular. However, creating materials is going to be also really time consuming because you have to be really careful on, on selecting, on organizing, and everything that that is creating materials you have to think really well all the things that you're going to include, how you're going to include, and also how you're going to present it to your students. The factors that the factors that have to be considered are that creating your own materials are not casualty, that it needs to be learner-centered, and it also has to consider the context. In the casualty is because you need to have a purpose or a goal that will achieve some, or that you're going to achieve that goal with these materials, or not just because casual materials. You need to focus on the learner. In this, we are going to see that it is, you can help yourself with a needs analysis where you are analyzing the needs of the learner, and so you can create those materials according to that. And also with the need analysis, you have to consider, or you are going to find the context, and based on the context, then you can develop these materials. Some guidelines that we have in order to design the materials is that we will have guidelines. However, they are not considered a set of rules to be applied, as you can be only a guide for you to create your materials. They can be modified to adjust them to the specific context. Next, needs analysis as point of departure for materials design. The gap is that ELT material does not match to the real needs of partners, teachers, students, parents, and administrators. Reason of the gap, no previous need analysis is carried out before designing the materials. And why needs analysis? As I said before, it makes students' needs visible. The designer of the material becomes aware of students' characteristics and needs. It provides the basis for the design of principal materials which can fulfill the real needs of partners. Now, as a topic, we have the role of teachers as material developers. The first one is, okay, yes, teachers can create their own materials, but they are also considered as material developers. And we will say that it is a process that all teachers are considered to have the potential to be a material developer. However, in the process, we need to fulfill some demands, and for the development of the materials, ask for several demands to be considered. For example, that it has to be the learner center, you have to focus on the context, also to create materials which enhance the students' attitudes towards the language, and so on. Some of the principles is that teachers must set their objectives in order to develop the coherent materials. As I said before, it is not only casualty. We need to set objectives, purposes, so we can follow that path and create the coherent and the correct and appropriate materials for students. And finally, the components. Materials must contain essential components to fulfill students' needs and goals. And how we're going to know the students' needs and goals? Well, through the needs analysis that needs to be applied. In conclusion, language learning materials are a fundamental aspect in prompting an effective teaching and learning environment. A material grounded on needs analysis is able to fulfill students' needs, and they may have a more positive effect of the students' learning and prompt greater language achievements. Teachers have a big responsibility on developing the most effective, appropriate, and flexible materials for their students and their programs, because no teaching learning situation is really static. They constantly need to be designing or adapting materials. And teachers, as well as writers of textbooks, need to become aware of the role of needs analysis before attempting to design any textbooks or materials for English teaching in order to acquire what the particular needs of the target students are. So as you can see, as a whole, the needs analysis plays a fundamental role in the creation of materials. Due to this is going to be our tool that we are going to have as a base, so we can create the materials that are appropriate for our specific students in our specific context. with a specific curriculum. So that's it.